Hey, welcome everybody to Getting a Grip on the Michigan Business Network, the podcast that comes to you, I don't know, every periodically, every couple months. And on this podcast, we talk about EOS and the impact that EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, can and does have on businesses and organizations and nonprofits of all sizes. We talk about lessons learned. We talk about things that go smoothly. We talk about things that don't go smoothly, open and honest. And I'm really excited to have as my guest on this podcast, this episode of the podcast, Hope Lovell, who is the CEO of Lovejoy. Hope, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm just so excited to be on here today and to talk about EOS and my journey.
Yeah, me too. And Hope, just for our listeners who may not be familiar with Lovejoy, let's just introduce yourself and Lovejoy and what Lovejoy does.
Lovejoy Community Services, we're a nonprofit organization. We specialize in providing residential care and housing to adults with disabilities. And we really focus in around supporting adults that have autism or intellectual developmental disabilities. We have programs located throughout Michigan between Detroit, Flint, as well as Lansing. We've been doing this for 20 years. I started this organization with my mom, who came out of the school system supporting children with special needs. Over this time, it's just been a wonderful journey in doing residential care. We have served both adults with developmental disabilities, but as well as mental illness, older adults, traumatic brain injury, all with the goal and the thrust of helping them remain in the community and not in an institutional setting like jail, hospitalizations, or nursing homes. That's what we do.
That is such awesome work and so impactful. And you've been on your EOS journey now for about 9, 10 months, right? I mean, officially.
Yeah.
So for those listening, maybe describe, because there's a lot of moving parts at Lovejoy. There's a lot of things
Yeah.
going on. You've got and it can be a pretty intense environment. You're dealing with folks with disabilities, you're dealing with regulatory
Mhm.
issues, you're dealing with state issues, you're dealing with
Yeah.
staff.
Yeah.
Um, what was running the organization like before EOS? And then we'll kind of after that kind of go into what it's been like since.
Yeah, so let's talk about life before EOS. And I love how you said it. There's a lot of moving parts, right? Because we are in a highly regulated industry. We have to make sure that we get the rules right at the state level. We work with various county partners. We also work with guardians and family members. And there still are a lot of balls to be juggled, and because we started this organization really as, a mother and daughter team, my mom and I really many times found ourselves trying to reach into the organization and fix this. And we were just kind of playing like whack-a-mole, right? Every time something popped up, it was like, get it over here. And then something else popped up and get it over here. And so, we're both like day to day, like boom, 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 boom. And, and so, you know, it is nothing but our passion and a lot of grace that we haven't gotten burned out over these years. And, we were like, we want a better way of doing it, but we just didn't know how.
Yeah.
And um, Before EOS, we were honestly, from an organizational structure, pretty flat, right? So
Hmm.
we mostly employ a lot of caregivers. And then there are, managers within the homes, and we would give those managers, some guidelines and structure. But in terms of really having an interdisciplinary team to help us, we didn't have that. And so I'm happy to say, is there still whack-a-mole moments? Yes, but EOS has helped us along to be proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, and you're touching on such an important point. The accountability chart, we call it in EOS, the structure of who's accountable for what and
Mm-hmm.
exactly what are the roles that they're accountable for and finding the right person to do that. Now, I know you've done a lot of work around the leadership team in identifying
Yeah,
first the structure. In fact, I remember when we first started working together, we thought we had the right structure and the right roles defined and the
yeah,
right people. And then upon reflection, you were the one that called it out and said, I don't think this is right. We need to go back to the drawing board. And so we
yeah.
did, right? And now
Mm-hmm.
you have a
Mm-hmm.
team, a leadership team. So, would you say that like that accountability structure has been kind of the biggest aha, or is that where it started? And has
I would,
accountability increased? Like,
yeah.
give me some input on that.
You know, so let's start with one of those tools, and I really liked the right people in the right seat.
Yeah.
And when we started down the path of EOS, we were putting the folks we had in those seats, and that right person, right seat, do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it, right? And not a knock to our team, but what we found is that the folks that we were trying to put in those roles really honestly did not have the capacity to do the job and fulfill the role that we needed filled out to really have a really solid leadership team. And so, Mike, I appreciate you working with me to execute this strategy around bringing in fractional supports, because one of the reasons we hadn't moved to really bring in that interdisciplinary team is because, budget concerns, right? When you talk about trying to bring in, a finance person and a full-time HR person, each one of those could easily be about 100 plus thousand
Yeah.
dollars a year. So
Yeah.
really, working with the EOS community and helping us to bring on, fractional team members to really fill out that accountability chart with people who had the capacity and the skill set has been a game changer for us.
Yeah, it's such a good testimonial for finding you can find a highly skilled, and you have found very highly skilled
Mhm.
fractional resources in finance and HR that can get more done in a
And
part-time week.
technology.
Yeah, and technology too. Get more
Hmm.
done in a part-time week than it would than a full-time hire can get done in 2 weeks, right? They get more done in
Yeah.
10, 15, 20 hours. And if you outgrow that, they're very comfortable helping you find a full-time replacement at some point too. So it's really
Yeah.
allowed you, at least from my perspective, it seems like it's allowed you to get that right person, the right persons in the right seats, get that leadership team set up, get it solid, get it accountable, get it clear. Because we all know as goes the leadership team, so goes the organization.
That's right.
So, and how has that gone? So once you foundationally had the tools mastered at the leadership team level. You understood where
Hmm.
you were headed, what your
Hmm.
vision traction organizer, what your core values were, your core focus, your go-to-market strategy, your 10-year target, 3-year picture, 1-year plan, all
Yep. Yep.
that.
Yep.
You had that down and you
Hmm.
understood how to run a meeting. You understood how to develop a scorecard. You understood how to establish rocks. Um, how did how did you get that conveyed to the rest of the organization, the rest of the staff, and how did that go over? How did they receive it?
So, um, what our leadership team has really helped to do is to help to build internal capacity, right? And when we are coming together and we're talking on that weekly basis, and then we start running these L10s and we're bringing our teams together from various level from the program level, from the management level up to the leadership level. It helps to build consensus all the way through the organization.
Yeah.
And that for us has been tremendous. I think I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and it was talking about communication and how people, communication is one of the, we're doing it now, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of the areas that in an organization you find that it's a struggle, because even though we're sharing a lot of words, it doesn't mean that the person on the other side is really getting the type of information they need to be able to move the needle for them or to bring understanding for them. And so with EOS, that's really what has been the game changer. We've had the tools and like in IDSing and getting down to the issue. Many times people feel what's wrong, but they don't know, like, they need that moment and that time to peel that onion back to
Yeah.
really get a feel of how can they implement this. And I'll share with you really quickly a testimonial. So, in looking at our scorecard, one of the things that we measure is overtime, right? And so this is information that is shared at the management level, and it's shared at our leadership team level. And we track it, we talk about it. And from a high level, generally we were approaching it like, well, maybe we need to feel, we need to get these positions filled quicker. But when we had a chance to really bring our frontline team in on the conversation and then talking with them about the tools and the scorecard, what we found was, well, overtime is not, generally it's not a hot button for them. Their hot button was call offs, right? So we
Okay.
weren't speaking kind of the same level, because what we found is that each team has a different hot button.
Yeah.
So they're would like, oh, these call offs, and some people were getting burnt out. Peel that onion back, Mike. What we found is that we didn't have good communication
Yeah.
happening at that level. And our supervisors were just, they were calling folks, and they just always had their go to people. And those
Yeah.
go to people were getting burnt out. And so when we started wanting to put in a solution in place, well, how do we communicate broadly that there's been a call off, so now that more staff can have an opportunity to participate? Not only did it allow for some um, weight to get pulled off of that staff that was getting a lot of the overtime because they were tired, right? But it also allowed us to change our scorecard outcomes and decrease the overtime. So,
Yeah.
that's what EOS has been allowing us to do, is kind of reach into those levels and see where we have communication lapses.
That's such a good example and testimonial because communication, and I think I talked about this on that other podcast, episode of the podcast. It's poor communication is at like pandemic levels, right? I mean, organizations across the world, and definitely in the United States, struggle with poor communication. I saw a statistic the other day that, and these may not be exact numbers, but 90+% of managers believe that they're communicating well. But when they ask their team members, it's like 15% of them say they're getting good
Mhm.
communication. So there's this gap. And what you're talking about
Yeah.
is so how do you fix that? Well, the tools, the EOS tools, when you implement them, kind of force that improvement in communication because they call out
Yes.
areas of miscommunication by diving to the root of the issue, like your overtime issue. That's such a good
Mhm.
example. Um, Switching gears just a bit. So Lovejoy is a nonprofit, and in folks that
Mhm.
have read Traction and are familiar with EOS may think, isn't that for-profit entrepreneurial businesses?
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
have you found it to be different? And have you found it to be different for a nonprofit? And what has had to be adapted for the nonprofit world for this to be successful?
So interestingly enough, I was in that same group of people. I heard about EOS years ago. I've had friends who took their companies through the EOS process and incorporating the model. And one of my biggest reasons I didn't do it back then was because, oh, we're a nonprofit.
Yeah.
We're not a for-profit business like that. And was I ever wrong? I was so wrong. So I'll be honest, we really haven't had to adjust really anything for the model to have it accommodate really this our nonprofit legal structure. What EOS does is it really gets down to the operating model, the
Yeah.
operating system. And as a nonprofit with we've got almost 50 employees. We're dealing with, when we've got management, we've got all these different things. It's helped us tremendously because um, in our world, we say no margin, no mission. I mean, nonprofits still have to make money, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to be able to execute on the mission. You're not going to be able to retain your staff. You're not going to be able to fulfill the needs of customers, or for us, we call them residents. So, no, it has
Yeah.
been
That
tremendous.
I think that's I'm not surprised by that answer. I think that's exactly right. And when we first met, and when I've worked with other nonprofits, we talk about things like the nonprofit has to be willing to operate like a business. Lovejoy
Mhm.
is willing to operate like a business because no margin, no mission. But that's when you think about it, that's the case for for-profit businesses too. Like, are you really
Right?
willing to implement accountability and structure, and are you really willing to identify where you're trying to get to and have metrics around that so that we can measure progress? It's the same thing, whether you're for
Yeah.
profit or not profit. There's terminology that's different. Like, we talk about
Mhm.
sales in a for profit business, and we might talk about fundraising in a nonprofit, right? But
Yeah.
those are just semantics, right? The foundation, I
Right.
love the way you phrased it, Hope. The foundation of improving your operating system and how you operate is consistent whether you're for profit or not for profit. Have there been any challenges or sticking points that you've identified on the journey so far? Like, what has been something, or any
Yeah.
advice you'd give to somebody who's considering the U.S. journey?
Yeah, I would. So I'm one of those people, if possible, I'd like to get it right the first time. And initially, I was probably intimidated by the tools and was like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to get it. And so I would say, don't be afraid to play, right? That IDS, IDSing, um, try the solution. If the solution doesn't work, then, come back to it. Leave it on there. Don't be afraid to get it wrong. Just only be afraid to try.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying was my aha moment. You and I also have I joined the integrator group. That group has been wonderful in really giving, I would say for myself, the confidence to play and try the different tools and to not get intimidated by them. Like 90.io initially was like, oh, like, I don't know, me and these
Yeah.
software systems, I'm gonna let someone on my team do this. Um and initially I did until I built up the confidence to start just navigating it myself and I saw how intuitive it was. So
Yeah, no,
try.
that's no, I think that's so good because so many of the companies and organizations and nonprofits and for-profits that I've worked with over the years go through that same journey in the beginning where it seems
Mhm.
overwhelming. Like, there's all these
Yeah.
new tools, there's all this new language, there's this new software if you choose to run it on software like 90.io. And and there's a tendency, especially for driven people who want to get it right the first time, to kind of get intimidated and maybe stressed. And I
Mhm.
love your answer. Don't be afraid to play. I'm going to use that. Don't be afraid to go and try, because as you try and as you succeed and as you fail, you will get better. And then you
Mhm.
start to see the matrix at some point, right? You get to the point where you can see what it's doing and how it's impacting and how to roll it out to your staff, and
Mhm.
it becomes a lot easier. So that is great stuff. Hope, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being on. Um, if folks are interested in learning more about Lovejoy, what's the best way for them to get that information? Or if they want to support Lovejoy as a donor, and I can tell you there's not a better organization to support, how would they do that?
Thank you, Mike. Please check out our website at www.lovejoysnc, like special needs center.org. So
So it's
www.lovejoysnc.org.
perfect. Thank you, Hope, for being on.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening and watching the podcast. We hope you have a fantastic day. Carpe diem, and we'll see you on the flip side.